At Crescent Heights University, Marcus Thompson, a dedicated political science student, faces an unexpected hurdle when he receives an unjust failing grade from Professor Harold Jacobs, a man haunted by his own biases. With dreams of law school at stake, Marcus turns to his grandfather, a retired educator, for guidance. When his grandfather confronts Professor Jacobs, it sparks a journey of redemption and transformation that will challenge deeply rooted prejudices and reshape their lives forever. Can Marcus rise above adversity and inspire change within the institution? Join us on this gripping journey of resilience and justice, and discover how one young man's fight against injustice can ignite a powerful movement. If you're intrigued by what happens next, leave a comment and subscribe to our channel for more compelling stories. Marcus Andrews stood at the gates of Crescent Heights University, the same prestigious institution his mother had always dreamed he would attend. It was a bright autumn morning, and the campus was bustling with the excitement of students heading to their classes, the air filled with the scent of freshly fallen leaves. Marcus, now in his junior year, took a deep breath and looked around, feeling a rush of pride and anticipation. Crescent Heights wasn't just any university, it was renowned for its rigorous academic programs, top-tier faculty, and a reputation for producing some of the best minds in the country. For Marcus, a political science major with ambitions of becoming a civil rights lawyer, it felt like the perfect place to grow, to learn, and to make his mark on the world. His mother had always believed in the power of education. She had raised him with a deep respect for learning, encouraging him to follow in the footsteps of his grandfather, a prominent civil rights activist who had dedicated his life to fighting for equality and justice. To Marcus, Crescent Heights symbolized not only a step toward his personal dreams, but also a chance to honor his family's legacy. However, as Marcus made his way to his first class of the semester, there was a slight feeling of unease that he couldn't quite shake. The university, for all its prestige, had a history of exclusion, one that wasn't always addressed openly. Stories from other students, rumors whispered in quiet corners of the campus, suggested that not everyone at Crescent Heights felt equally welcomed. But Marcus wasn't the type to back down from a challenge. He believed in hard work, determination, and fairness. If there were obstacles in his way, he would overcome them. And so, with his head held high and his heart full of hope, he walked into his first lecture, ready to start a new chapter in his life. It wasn't long before Marcus encountered Dr. William Monroe, a professor in the political science department who had been at Crescent Heights for nearly 20 years. Monroe was known for his tough grading and rigorous expectations. Students either admired or feared him, but he was undeniably influential in shaping the academic and political thought at the university. When Marcus walked into Dr. Monroe's class on political theory and social justice, he was excited. This was the class that could change everything for him. Political theory had always fascinated him, the way ideas shaped governments, laws, and societies. Dr. Monroe, with his reputation, seemed like the perfect mentor for someone like Marcus, who wanted to make a difference in the world. At first, Dr. Monroe seemed impressed by Marcus. During the initial weeks of the semester, Marcus participated in class discussions, offered thoughtful insights, and worked hard on his assignments. Monroe would nod approvingly whenever Marcus made a particularly astute point, and Marcus felt like he was on the right path. But then, something shifted. As the weeks progressed, Marcus noticed a change in the way Dr. Monroe treated him. His ideas, once met with interest, were now dismissed with curt remarks. His papers, which he poured his heart into, began to receive lower grades than he expected, accompanied by vague and unhelpful feedback. Marcus couldn't understand what had changed. The frustration began to build. Marcus had always excelled academically, and this wasn't just about his grades, it was about his future. Law schools were competitive, and every grade, every recommendation mattered. He couldn't afford to let anything stand in his way. Marcus confided in his friends about the situation. "I don't get it," he said one evening in the campus caf, sitting across from his roommate, Daniel. "I'm working harder than ever, but Monroe's been tearing my work apart." It's like nothing I do is good enough. Daniel, a history major with a sharp wit and a skeptical outlook on life, shrugged. Man, Monroe's tough on everyone. Maybe you're just feeling the pressure. This place isn't exactly a walk in the park. I don't know, Marcus replied, staring into his coffee cup. It feels different. It feels personal. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Personal, like how? Marcus paused, unsure of how to put his feelings into words. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the way Dr. Monroe had been acting toward him didn't sit right. There was a condescending tone in his comments, an edge to his critiques that Marcus hadn't noticed before. And it wasn't just him. He had overheard other students, mostly those from minority backgrounds, express similar frustrations. I think he has a bias, Marcus said finally, his voice low. Not just against me, but against other students too. People like me. Daniel frowned. You mean like racial bias? Marcus nodded slowly. I don't have any hard proof, but that's what it feels like. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his expression serious. That's a big accusation, Marcus. Are you sure? No, Marcus admitted. I'm not sure, but something's not right. I can feel it. As the semester wore on, Marcus' frustration only grew. The turning point came after a midterm essay, one that Marcus had spent countless hours researching and writing. He had chosen to focus on systemic racism in the criminal justice system, a topic that was deeply personal to him and aligned with his career aspirations. He was proud of the paper, believing it to be some of his best work. But when Dr. Monroe handed the papers back in class, Marcus' heart sank. Scrawled across the top of his essay was a large red C. A C. Marcus couldn't believe it. He had never received such a low grade on a paper in his life. He flipped through the pages, reading Monroe's comments, but they were vague and dismissive. Unoriginal analysis. Lacks depth. Failed to engage with key theoretical frameworks. Marcus felt his face flush with anger. He had poured his soul into that paper. He had researched every angle, cited leading scholars, and made a compelling argument. How could it lack depth? After class, Marcus approached Dr. Monroe, determined to understand what had gone wrong. Professor Monroe, Marcus began, trying to keep his voice steady. I'd like to discuss my grade on the midterm paper. I spent a lot of time on it, and I don't quite understand your feedback. Monroe glanced at him, then looked back down at the stack of papers on his desk. Ah, Marcus, he said, his tone cool and dismissive. I thought my comments were clear. Your analysis was shallow, and you didn't engage with the material in a meaningful way. I disagree, Marcus said, struggling to remain calm. I worked hard on that paper. I researched the topic thoroughly and made a strong argument. Can we go over it together? Maybe I'm missing something. Monroe sighed, clearly irritated. Marcus, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but you need to understand that not every argument is equally valid. You're still learning, and this is part of the process. Accept the feedback and move on. Marcus stood there, stunned. There was something in Monroe's tone condescending, dismissive, that struck him deep. He wasn't just being critiqued, he was being brushed off. And it felt like more than just academic feedback. With a clenched jaw, Marcus nodded and walked away, but the encounter stayed with him. He had always been taught to respect his professors, to listen and learn from them. But now, for the first time, he questioned whether that respect was being reciprocated. Marcus wasn't one to give up easily. He knew he needed to find a way to navigate the situation with Dr. Monroe, but he couldn't do it alone. So, he reached out to one of the few faculty members he trusted, Professor Michelle Davis, a well-respected professor in the sociology department who specialized in issues of race, inequality, and education. Professor Davis had been a mentor to Marcus since his freshman year. She had seen his potential early on and had always encouraged him to think critically, not just about the world around him, but about his place in it. When Marcus met with her in her office, he laid everything out the way Monroe had been treating him, the harsh feedback on his work, and his growing suspicion that it was more than just academic rigor at play. Professor Davis listened carefully, her face thoughtful. When Marcus finished, she leaned forward in her chair. Marcus, I believe you, she said firmly. I've heard similar complaints from other students about Dr. Monroe. Unfortunately, these kinds of biases, whether conscious or unconscious, are more common than we like to admit in academia. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had been worried that even someone as progressive as Professor Davis might tell him he was overreacting. "What can I do?" Marcus asked. "I can't let this affect my grades. Law school is so competitive, and I don't want one professor's bias to derail my future." Professor Davis nodded. "You're right to be concerned, but there are ways to address this. First, document everything. Keep a record of your interactions with Dr. Monroe, the feedback he gives you, and any patterns you notice. If this becomes a formal complaint, you'll need evidence." Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of determination building inside him. "Second," Professor Davis continued, "I'll be here to support you. If you need advice, if you want someone to look over your work before submitting it to Monroe, or if you just need to talk, my door is always open." Armed with Professor Davis' advice, Marcus returned to his work with renewed focus. He started documenting his interactions with Dr. Monroe, carefully noting the professor's comments and grading patterns. He also began reaching out to other students who had taken Monroe's classes, trying to gauge whether they had experienced similar treatment. The more he dug, the more he found. Other students, particularly students of color, had similar stories, unfair grades, dismissive feedback, and a sense that their contributions were not being valued. It wasn't just Marcus. But as Marcus' frustration grew, so did his resolve. He wasn't going to let Dr. Monroe or anyone stand in the way of his dreams. For his next major assignment in Monroe's class, Marcus poured everything he had into his work. He chose a topic that was both bold and deeply personal: the legacy of systemic racism in American institutions, drawing connections to modern-day inequalities in education, healthcare, and the criminal justice system. He backed up his arguments with meticulous research, using both historical and contemporary sources. When he submitted the paper, he felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. He knew the quality of his work, but he also knew that Monroe's bias could affect the grade. Sure enough, when the grades were posted, Marcus' heart sank again. Another C. But this time, Marcus was ready. He reviewed the feedback, which was again vague and dismissive, and decided it was time to act. Marcus wasn't going to let this go quietly. He met with Professor Davis again, showing her both the paper and Monroe's feedback. "This is excellent work," Professor Davis said, after reading through the paper. "There's no way this deserves a C. Monroe's feedback is completely inadequate." Marcus felt a surge of validation. He had known his work was strong, but hearing it from someone as respected as Professor Davis gave him the confidence he needed to move forward. Together they discussed the next steps. Marcus decided to file a formal grievance with the university, outlining his concerns about Dr. Monroe's grading practices and the potential bias he had observed. He knew it wouldn't be an easy fight. Professors like Monroe had tenure and influence, but he wasn't going to let that stop him. The university's response was slow, as expected, but Marcus was prepared for the long haul. He had his evidence, his support system, and his conviction that what was happening was just about grades, it was about justice. As the semester drew to a close, Marcus felt a shift within himself. He was no longer just a student fighting for his future. He was a young man standing up for what was right, not only for himself, but for all the students who had been treated unfairly. The battle with Dr. Monroe was just beginning, but Marcus knew one thing for sure: he wasn't going to back down. As the winter semester approached, the chilly air at Crescent Heights University was filled with a sense of impending change. Marcus was well aware that he was about to enter a challenging phase of his battle against Dr. Monroe. After submitting his grievance, he had anticipated a swift investigation, but the university bureaucracy moved at a snail's pace. Days turned into weeks, and the uncertainty gnawed at him. He attended his classes, but every time he saw Dr. Monroe, a cold knot formed in his stomach. He couldn't shake the feeling that his fight wasn't just personal. It was emblematic of a larger issue within the institution, systematic problem that affected many students. During this time, Marcus also maintained his conversations with Professor Davis. She had been his confidant and advisor, helping him strategize how to navigate the complexities of the university's policies. Patience is crucial in these situations, she often reminded him. Change takes time, but your courage can pave the way. Determined to stay proactive, Marcus began organizing study groups with other students who had experienced similar struggles. He wanted to create a support network, a community where they could share their experiences and strategies for success. His first meeting took place in a small study room in the library, a place buzzing with energy and ambition. The group consisted of a diverse mix of students, some from different backgrounds, others studying various disciplines, but they all shared a common goal to advocate for fairness and equality in their education. Marcus felt invigorated by their enthusiasm and began to brainstorm ways to amplify their voices. "I think we should consider putting together a petition," Marcus suggested, leaning forward in his chair. "We need to show the administration that we're not just a few isolated cases, we're a collective force demanding change." Jessica, a sociology major who had faced her own struggles with biased grading, nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. If we can gather enough signatures, it'll show them that this issue affects more than just a handful of students. It's systemic." "Right," Marcus continued. "And we can also collect testimonies. Personal stories resonate more than just statistics. If we can present real experiences, it might compel the university to take our concerns seriously." The group buzzed with excitement, and Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. They began outlining their plan to gather signatures, share personal stories, and present their collective grievances to the university administration. It was a daunting task, but they were determined to be heard. As the weeks passed, Marcus and his fellow students worked tirelessly. They set up tables around campus, asking students to sign their petition and share their stories. They utilized social media platforms to raise awareness, creating a hashtag that gained traction among the student body. Marcus' efforts resonated with many, and soon the petition began to collect hundreds of signatures. He was heartened to see students from different disciplines and backgrounds joining in solidarity. The collective energy invigorated him, and he felt the weight of the fight shift from his shoulders to a shared responsibility among many. But amidst the growing momentum, Marcus also faced challenges. Not everyone at Crescent Heights was supportive of their cause. He began receiving backlash from some faculty members who viewed their actions as an affront to the university's reputation. One afternoon, as he was passing through the student union, he overheard a couple of students discussing the petition. "Can you believe they're trying to bring down Dr. Monroe?" one of them scoffed. "He's a respected professor. They're just looking for excuses to complain." Marcus' heart sank. He knew that not everyone would understand their struggle, but he hadn't expected such harsh criticism from his peers. It was disheartening, but it only fueled his determination to push forward. After weeks of hard work, the day arrived for Marcus and his group to present their petition to the university administration. The meeting was scheduled with the dean of students, and the atmosphere in the room was tense. Marcus stood alongside Jessica and a few other representatives, clutching a binder filled with signatures, testimonials, and documentation of their grievances. The dean, a stern-looking woman named Dr. Henderson, sat at the head of the table flanked by several other faculty members. She reviewed the petition with a furrowed brow, the air thick with anticipation. "Thank you for coming today," Dr. Henderson said, her tone neutral. "I appreciate your efforts in bringing these concerns to our attention. I want to understand your grievances better, but I also urge you to consider the reputation of this institution and the faculty members involved." Marcus felt a surge of anger rise within him. "Respectfully, Dean Henderson, this isn't just about reputation, it's about the well-being of students. Dr. Monroe's behavior has affected many of us, and we deserve to have our voices heard." Jessica chimed in. "We're not here to attack Dr. Monroe personally. We want to address a systemic issue that affects students' education and future opportunities. This is about fairness and equity in the academic experience." The discussion continued, with Marcus and his fellow students articulating their concerns passionately. They presented their evidence, highlighting the patterns of biased grading and the emotional toll it had taken on them. Marcus felt empowered as he spoke, knowing that he was representing not just himself, but a community of students yearning for change. As the meeting concluded, Dr. Henderson promised to take their concerns seriously and assured them that an investigation would be launched into the allegations against Dr. Monroe. Marcus felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. This was a step forward, but he knew the journey was far from over. With the administration's promise of an investigation, Marcus experienced a roller coaster of emotions. There was hope that their voices had finally been heard, but he also understood that change often took time. Weeks passed, and the investigation into Dr. Monroe's practices began, but the process felt painfully slow. During this time, Marcus continued to meet with his study group, finding solace in their camaraderie. They shared their struggles, successes, and plans for the future, and it helped to ease the anxiety that had settled in their hearts. Each meeting reinforced their collective strength, reminding Marcus that he wasn't alone in this fight. However, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Word had spread among faculty members about the petition, and some began to view Marcus and his peers as troublemakers. In a particularly disheartening encounter, Marcus overheard a conversation between two professors in the hallway. "I heard those students are trying to take down Dr. Monroe," one said, shaking her head. "They don't understand the damage they're doing to the university's reputation." Marcus felt a pang of frustration. He wanted to scream that this wasn't about reputation, it was about fairness and the right to be treated with dignity and respect. But he also knew that reacting with anger wouldn't help their cause. Instead, he focused on keeping the momentum going. The group organized a rally on campus to raise awareness about their movement and to invite other students to share their experiences with biased grading and discrimination. They hoped to attract more supporters and encourage others to join their cause. The day of the rally dawned bright and clear, and the campus buzzed with excitement. Marcus and his friends set up tables with posters, flyers, and a sign-up sheet for anyone interested in getting involved. They encouraged students to share their stories, emphasizing the importance of solidarity in their fight for justice. As the crowd began to gather, Marcus felt a rush of exhilaration. He took to the stage, heart pounding as he spoke to the crowd. "We are here today to stand up for what is right. We will not be silenced, and we will not allow our voices to be ignored. We deserve an education free from bias and discrimination." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Marcus felt the energy of the moment. They were united in their mission, and for the first time, he felt the power of community lifting him. As the rally continued, students shared their stories of resilience, each tale resonating deeply within Marcus. He was reminded that their fight was not just for academic justice, it was for the future of countless students who had faced similar struggles. But amidst the uplifting atmosphere, Marcus noticed a group of students standing off to the side, arms crossed and frowning. They seemed to be students who disagreed with the rally's purpose, and their presence cast a shadow over the event. One of them, a tall student with a stern expression, stepped forward. "What you're doing is divisive. Dr. Monroe is a respected professor, and this rally is nothing more than a witch hunt." The crowd grew quiet, tension hanging in the air. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "We're not attacking Dr. Monroe personally. This is about ensuring that every student has an equal opportunity to succeed. Our education should not be hindered by bias." The tall student smirked. "You think this will solve your problems? All you're doing is creating more divisions on campus." "Enough!" a voice cut through the air. It was Jessica, stepping forward with conviction. "This isn't about creating divisions. It's about fighting for equality and justice. If you can't understand that, then maybe you're part of the problem." The crowd erupted into murmurs of agreement, and Marcus felt a surge of gratitude for Jessica's support. The tall student backed down, clearly taken aback by the response. It was a small victory, but it reinforced the importance of standing together against adversity. In the days following the rally, things began to shift at Crescent Heights. While the student body seemed more united, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that there were whispers of retaliation brewing among some faculty members. He heard rumors that Dr. Monroe was planning to address the issue publicly, attempting to frame the students as troublemakers who were disrupting the educational environment. Marcus shared his concerns with Professor Davis during one of their meetings. "It feels like they're preparing to push back against us. I can't help but think Dr. Monroe will try to turn this around and make it seem like we're the ones in the wrong." Professor Davis nodded, her expression grave. "It's not uncommon for those in power to shift the narrative when faced with criticism. You need to be prepared for that. Continue documenting everything and make sure you have support on your side." The tension escalated when Marcus received an email inviting him to a faculty meeting where Dr. Monroe would present his perspective on the issues raised by the student body. This is it, Marcus thought, a mix of anxiety and determination coursing through him. It's time to stand up for what's right. The day of the faculty meeting arrived, and Marcus found himself sitting in a large conference room filled with professors, some of whom had been supportive of the students' cause, while others appeared skeptical. Dr. Monroe stood at the front, his demeanor confident but defensive. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice smooth yet authoritative. "I wanted to address the recent student rally and the allegations that have been made regarding my teaching methods and grading practices." As he spoke, Marcus felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Dr. Monroe attempted to frame the students as misguided, claiming that their actions undermined the integrity of the university. "I believe in high academic standards, and I am committed to challenging my students to excel. However, I fear that some students may have misinterpreted my feedback as bias." The room buzzed with murmurs, and Marcus felt his heart race. He stood up, ready to voice his concerns. "Respectfully, Dr. Monroe, your feedback has been vague and dismissive. Many of us have felt undermined and marginalized in your classroom, and that isn't acceptable." The tension in the room escalated as Marcus spoke, and he felt a wave of support from some faculty members who nodded in agreement. "But Dr. Monroe shot back, his voice rising. "You're putting your personal feelings above academic rigor. It's important to understand that feedback is intended to push students, not coddle them." "I'm not asking to be coddled," Marcus replied, holding his ground. "I'm asking for constructive feedback that recognizes the hard work we put into our studies. This isn't just about my experience. It's about all the students who have faced similar treatment." The confrontation continued, and the dialogue became heated. Marcus felt a sense of empowerment as he shared the experiences of his peers, emphasizing the need for accountability in the classroom. He could see some faculty members shifting uncomfortably, recognizing the validity of his arguments. As the meeting concluded, Marcus felt both exhausted and exhilarated. He had confronted Dr. Monroe head-on, and while it hadn't been an easy battle, he felt a sense of camaraderie with those who had supported him. After the meeting, Jessica approached Marcus with a bright smile. "You did amazing. Your voice really made an impact." Marcus shrugged, trying to hide his nerves. "Thanks, but I still feel like we have a long way to go." "We do," Jessica agreed. "But this is a turning point. We're not backing down, and neither are you." The following days were filled with anticipation. Students began discussing the faculty meeting, and rumors spread that the administration was taking the situation seriously. However, the atmosphere was also charged with anxiety. Some students began to worry about potential backlash from Dr. Monroe and his supporters. Marcus received an unexpected message from a fellow student, Ethan, who had been in one of Dr. Monroe's classes. "Hey, I wanted to talk to you about something. I've been hearing whispers among faculty members about potential consequences for students who spoke out. I'm worried about how this will affect you and the others." Marcus' heart sank. He had feared that the faculty's response would be retaliatory, and now it seemed like those fears were becoming a reality. "What do you mean by consequences?" Marcus asked, concern etched on his face. "I overheard some professors discussing it. They were saying they might make examples of students who are leading this movement," Ethan replied, his voice low. "I just wanted you to be aware." Marcus felt a wave of frustration wash over him. The very system they were fighting against was trying to suppress their voices, and it only solidified his resolve to keep pushing forward. He knew he had to communicate this information to his group and find a way to protect themselves. Determined not to let fear stifle their movement, Marcus called an emergency meeting with his study group. The atmosphere was tense, with everyone aware of the potential repercussions they faced. Marcus shared Ethan's information, and the group fell into a worried silence. "We can't let them intimidate us," Marcus said firmly, looking each of his friends in the eyes. "If we back down now, it will send a message that they can silence us. We need to be strategic about how we proceed." Jessica nodded. "We can't just focus on the negatives. We should continue gathering stories and building our community. Let's reach out to student organizations and see if they want to join us." The group brainstormed ideas, discussing ways to amplify their voices while ensuring their safety. They decided to draft an open letter to the administration, calling for transparency in the investigation process and advocating for protections for students who spoke out. The letter emphasized the importance of creating a safe environment for all students to share their experiences without fear of retribution. As they worked on the letter, a sense of unity enveloped the room. It felt empowering to know they were not alone in this fight. They compiled their thoughts and experiences, carefully crafting a message that would resonate with others. As Marcus and his group prepared to release the open letter, they received unexpected support from a prominent student organization on campus, the Student Government Association (SGA). The SGA's president, a charismatic junior named Leah, had heard about the rally and wanted to meet with Marcus. "Hi, Marcus," Leah said, shaking his hand enthusiastically. "I've been following your movement, and I think it's important. The SGA wants to help amplify your message." Marcus was taken aback by her enthusiasm. "Really, that would be incredible. We're trying to advocate for change and protect students who faced unfair treatment." Leah nodded. "I understand that the administration might be hesitant to take action, but we have the power to raise awareness and mobilize students. Let's collaborate on this open letter and make sure it reaches as many people as possible." With Leah's support, the open letter gained traction. They circulated it among various student organizations, encouraging them to sign on and add their voices to the cause. Within days, the letter had garnered hundreds of signatures, and it was clear that the student body was ready for change. The day the open letter was sent out was a moment of triumph for Marcus and his friends. They felt empowered, knowing they were pushing back against a system that had long overlooked their struggles. Within a few days, the administration responded, inviting Marcus, Leah, and a few other representatives to a meeting to discuss the concerns outlined in the letter. Marcus felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as he prepared for the meeting, knowing that they had finally made enough noise to get the administration's attention. As they gathered in the meeting room, Marcus could sense the weight of the moment. Dean Henderson and other faculty members sat across the table, their expressions serious yet attentive. "Thank you for coming," Dean Henderson began. "We appreciate your commitment to raising these important concerns. The university is committed to ensuring that all students feel supported and valued in their education." Marcus felt a flicker of hope. "We just want to ensure that our voices are heard and that there are protections for students who speak out against bias." Leah added, "We need to create a system that allows students to report grievances without fear of retaliation. Transparency in the investigation is crucial." The conversation continued, and for the first time, Marcus felt like the administration was truly listening. They discussed the need for comprehensive training on diversity and inclusion for faculty members, and the importance of creating a safe environment for students to share their experiences. As the meeting concluded, Dean Henderson promised to take their recommendations seriously and assured them that steps would be taken to address the concerns raised in the open letter. It was a significant step forward, and Marcus felt a sense of pride wash over him. In the weeks that followed, changes began to take shape at Crescent Heights University. Faculty training sessions on diversity and inclusion were scheduled, and the administration implemented new policies to protect students who reported grievances. Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey thus far. It hadn't been easy, but the struggles had brought him closer to his peers, forming bonds that would last well beyond their time at university. The fight had also ignited a passion within him to advocate for others, and he felt a sense of purpose emerging from the ashes of his struggle. One afternoon, while sitting in the library with Jessica, Marcus shared his thoughts. "I never imagined I'd be in this position, advocating for change. It feels surreal but also empowering." Jessica smiled, her eyes shining with determination. "You've grown so much through this process, Marcus. You've become a voice for those who felt silenced. This is just the beginning." But as they discussed their plans for the future, a message arrived from Ethan, alerting them that Dr. Monroe had responded to the administration's actions in a faculty meeting. His response was far from supportive. He had expressed outrage over the changes being made and hinted at potential backlash against students involved in the movement. The news hit Marcus hard. The fear of retaliation hung over them like a dark cloud, casting doubt on their progress. He knew that Dr. Monroe's influence extended beyond the classroom, and he could already sense the tension brewing among faculty members who had aligned themselves with him. As they prepared for another meeting with the administration, Marcus felt the pressure mounting. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were in for another battle, one that would require all of their strength and determination. During the meeting, Marcus stood firm, advocating for the protections that had been promised. "We need to ensure that students can speak freely without fear of repercussions. It's essential for creating a culture of trust and support on campus." Dean Henderson listened attentively, but also acknowledged the concerns raised by faculty members who were resistant to the changes. "We understand that there are differing perspectives, but we are committed to fostering an inclusive environment. Your voices matter, and we want to ensure that all students feel valued." Despite her assurances, Marcus could sense the tension in the room. The fight was far from over, and they would need to stay vigilant in their pursuit of justice. As the semester progressed, the pressure reached a boiling point. Dr. Monroe's camp grew bolder in their opposition to the changes being implemented, and whispers of retaliatory actions against students began circulating. Marcus and Jessica worked tirelessly to document everything, gathering testimonies and evidence to protect themselves. They knew they had to be prepared for whatever came next. Finally, the day arrived when the administration announced a public forum to discuss the ongoing changes and the university's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Marcus felt a mix of excitement and dread as they prepared to speak at the event, knowing that the stakes had never been higher. When the day of the forum arrived, the auditorium was packed with students, faculty, and community members. Marcus took a deep breath as he approached the podium, ready to share his story and advocate for those who had been silenced. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady despite the nerves coursing through him. "Today, we stand together to advocate for a change that will ensure every student feels safe and supported in their educational journey." As he spoke, he could feel the energy in the room shifting. He recounted the struggles they had faced, the systemic biases that had impacted so many, and the importance of accountability in education. He urged the administration to take concrete steps to protect students and foster an environment of inclusivity. But just as he finished his speech, Dr. Monroe stood up from the audience, interrupting the proceedings. "This is outrageous!" he exclaimed, his voice dripping with indignation. "These students are spreading misinformation and attempting to undermine the faculty's integrity. This is not how we should conduct ourselves at Crescent Heights." The room fell silent as tension crackled in the air. Marcus felt a surge of anger rising within him. He wasn't about to let Dr. Monroe derail their progress. "Respectfully, Dr. Monroe," Marcus replied, "this isn't about misinformation, this is about accountability. We have a right to voice our concerns and demand change. It's time to prioritize students' well-being over reputation." The atmosphere shifted, and murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. Marcus could see that their message was resonating, and he felt a renewed sense of determination. This was the climax of their fight, and they weren't backing down. The forum concluded with a promise from the administration to address the issues raised. In the days that followed, Marcus and his peers continued to advocate for their cause, rallying support from the student body and faculty alike. Slowly but surely, they began to see the fruits of their labor. The administration implemented new policies to protect students, and Dr. Monroe was placed under scrutiny for his teaching practices. The changes felt monumental, a testament to the power of student advocacy. As the semester drew to a close, Marcus reflected on the journey they had undertaken. It hadn't been easy, but the struggles had forged deep bonds among his friends, and they had become a force to be reckoned with on campus. On the final day of classes, Marcus and Jessica gathered with their study group to celebrate their achievements. They shared stories of resilience, laughter, and hope for the future. "We did it," Marcus said, raising a glass. "We stood together, and we made a difference." The group cheered, and Marcus felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He knew that their fight was far from over, but they had paved the way for change, igniting a spark of hope that would carry them forward. As the sun set over Crescent Heights, Marcus gazed at the horizon, filled with anticipation for the future. Together, they had faced adversity, and together they would continue to strive for justice and equality in their education. In the months that followed, Marcus continued to be involved in advocacy efforts on campus. He took on a leadership role within the student organization, working closely with Leah and Jessica to ensure that the progress they had made didn't fade away. They organized workshops on diversity and inclusion, inviting speakers from various backgrounds to share their experiences. Marcus felt a sense of purpose in these initiatives, knowing that they were creating a platform for students to feel heard and supported. As they prepared for a new academic year, Marcus also began to think about the future beyond Crescent Heights. The fight for justice in education had ignited a passion within him, and he felt compelled to continue advocating for students' rights in broader contexts. He applied for internships with nonprofit organizations focused on education equity, hoping to gain experience that would empower him to make a larger impact. His journey at Crescent Heights had shaped him into a resilient advocate, and he was determined to use his voice for change. As the new semester began, Marcus was excited to see the impact of their advocacy efforts on incoming students. They had created a more inclusive environment, and the university's commitment to diversity was evident in its policies and practices. During orientation, Marcus and his team spoke to new students about their experiences and the importance of standing up for their rights. He wanted to ensure that the next generation of students felt empowered to speak out against injustice. "Your voices matter," Marcus told the newcomers. "Don't hesitate to reach out if you ever feel marginalized or silenced. We're here to support you, and together we can create a community that prioritizes equity and inclusion." As the year progressed, the ripple effect of their movement continued to unfold. More students began to advocate for change, drawing inspiration from Marcus and his peers. The campus buzzed with energy as discussions around diversity and inclusion became central to the student experience. Marcus felt a sense of pride knowing that they had started something significant. The fight for justice in education was ongoing, but they had laid the groundwork for a brighter future. As the academic year came to a close, Marcus reflected on the journey he had undertaken. He had faced challenges, experienced personal growth, and forged deep connections with others who shared his passion for change. One evening, sitting on a bench overlooking the campus, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. The struggles had been daunting, but they had ignited a fire within him that would continue to burn brightly. He knew that the fight for justice in education was far from over, but he felt hopeful. Together with his friends, he had proven that their voices mattered, and that change was possible when they stood united. As the sun set over Crescent Heights, Marcus embraced the uncertainty of the future, knowing that he had the strength and resilience to continue advocating for those who had yet to find their voice. With hope in his heart and determination in his spirit, he looked forward to the journey ahead, ready to face whatever challenges lay in store. As summer break approached, Marcus and his friends found themselves immersed in their advocacy efforts. They organized summer workshops focused on leadership and advocacy skills for incoming students, hoping to foster a new generation of activists who would continue the work they had started. One evening, while planning the summer sessions in Jessica's living room, the group brainstormed ideas. "We need to make these workshops interactive," Jessica suggested, her enthusiasm infectious. "Let's incorporate role-playing scenarios where students can practice addressing bias in real time." Ethan chimed in. "And we could invite speakers who've successfully advocated for change at other universities. Hearing their stories could inspire the new students." The group nodded in agreement, their spirits high as they envisioned the impact they could have. It felt empowering to know they were creating a platform for students to voice their experiences and develop the skills to challenge injustice. However, as preparations for the workshops progressed, Marcus received troubling news. He learned that Dr. Monroe had been vocal about his dissatisfaction with the changes implemented at Crescent Heights. Reports surfaced that he was attempting to rally support from other faculty members to push back against the new policies. Marcus' heart sank. "We can't let him derail everything we've accomplished," he said during a meeting with his friends. "If he manages to sway the faculty, it could set us back significantly." "We need to stay focused on our mission," Jessica replied, her voice steady. "Let's not lose sight of what we're working toward. If we keep our momentum, we can't be ignored." Despite their determination, Marcus felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. Would their hard work withstand the scrutiny and potential backlash? As the summer workshops kicked off, the energy in the room was electric. Incoming students filled the seats, eager to learn and engage. Marcus took a moment to look around, filled with hope at the sight of so many passionate faces. "Welcome everyone," he began, addressing the group. "We're here to build a community of advocates, and together, we'll ensure that our voices are heard. This is about creating a culture of respect and inclusivity at Crescent Heights." Throughout the workshops, participants engaged in discussions, shared their stories, and practiced confronting bias in various scenarios. The camaraderie among students grew, fostering a sense of solidarity that Marcus had hoped for. During one session, a freshman named Mia shared her experience of feeling marginalized in her high school. "I wish I had the tools back then to stand up for myself," she said, her voice quivering with emotion. "But being here, I feel like I can finally make a difference." Marcus felt a surge of pride. "You're already making a difference by being here and sharing your story. Together, we'll ensure that no one feels alone in this fight." As the workshops continued, Marcus received an unexpected email from Dean Henderson. She invited him to discuss the ongoing challenges and the faculty's reaction to the new policies. Nervously, Marcus prepared for the meeting, knowing the stakes were high. When he entered the office, Dean Henderson greeted him warmly. "Marcus, thank you for meeting with me. I wanted to hear your thoughts on how we can further support the students during this transitional phase." As they talked, Marcus expressed his concerns about Dr. Monroe's influence among faculty members. "I believe it's crucial to reinforce our commitment to inclusivity and ensure that faculty are held accountable for their actions," he said, his voice firm. Dean Henderson nodded. "We're aware of the resistance from some faculty, and we're working on a plan to strengthen our commitment to diversity." "Your voice is vital in this process, Marcus." Feeling a renewed sense of purpose, Marcus realized that he had a role in shaping the university's future. This was an opportunity to advocate for lasting change. As the academic year approached, Marcus and his friends organized a rally to raise awareness about the ongoing challenges and encourage students to stand united. They envisioned it as a way to showcase their commitment to inclusivity and remind the administration of the power of student voices. "Let's make this rally impactful," Leah suggested during a planning meeting. "We should have speakers share their experiences, and we need to make posters to visually represent our message." The group worked tirelessly, promoting the rally on social media and reaching out to various student organizations. Excitement filled the air as the date approached. On the day of the rally, the campus was buzzing with energy. Students gathered, holding signs and chanting for change. Marcus felt a rush of adrenaline as he took the stage, his heart pounding in his chest. "Thank you for being here today," he shouted, the crowd roaring in response. "We're standing together to demand accountability and foster an environment where everyone feels safe and respected." Our voices matter." As he spoke, the crowd erupted in cheers. It felt like a powerful wave of unity, reinforcing their mission and commitment to creating a more inclusive campus. But as the rally concluded, Marcus noticed a group of faculty members lingering near the stage. It was clear that Dr. Monroe was among them, his expression tight with displeasure. Later that week, Marcus received an email from Dr. Monroe requesting a meeting. Anxiety bubbled within him as he prepared to face his adversary once again. When they met, Dr. Monroe's tone was icy. "Marcus, I've heard about the rally and the messages being spread. I believe your actions are causing unnecessary division among faculty and students." Marcus took a deep breath, steadying his resolve. "Dr. Monroe, this isn't about division, it's about accountability. Students deserve to have their voices heard, especially when they feel marginalized." "Dr. Monroe scoffed. "You're making it personal. I challenge you to understand that my methods are intended to push students, not to undermine them." "It's not personal, it's about creating a fair learning environment," Marcus countered. "I won't back down until all students feel valued and respected." As the conversation grew heated, Marcus felt a mix of anger and determination. He knew that he couldn't allow Dr. Monroe's perspective to silence the voices of his peers. In the wake of his confrontation with Dr. Monroe, Marcus focused on rallying support from both students and faculty who aligned with their mission. He organized meetings to strategize ways to combat the negative narratives surrounding their advocacy efforts. At one meeting, Leah suggested, "Let's create a coalition of students and supportive faculty members to amplify our voices. If we work together, we can present a united front." Marcus nodded, grateful for Leah's leadership. "We can share testimonies, collect data on student experiences, and present it to the administration. They need to see the real impact of these issues." As the coalition formed, they began to make strides in their efforts. They gathered stories from students, documenting their experiences and concerns, and reached out to faculty who supported their cause. The momentum built, and Marcus felt hopeful knowing that they were forging a path toward positive change. The struggle was far from over, but they were no longer fighting alone. As the semester progressed, tensions heightened again. Dr. Monroe escalated his campaign against the changes, rallying faculty who opposed the new policies. The administration faced increased pressure to reconsider their commitments to diversity and inclusion. Marcus and his coalition knew they had to act quickly. They organized a town hall meeting, inviting students, faculty, and administration to discuss the importance of the changes and the impact of the opposition. On the night of the town hall, the room was filled to capacity. Marcus stood at the front, addressing the crowd. "We're here tonight because we believe in the power of our voices and the need for accountability. Change is possible, but it requires all of us to stand together." As he spoke, other coalition members shared their testimonies, recounting their experiences and emphasizing the importance of creating a safe and inclusive environment. The room was charged with emotion, and many attendees expressed their support. But Dr. Monroe stood up, challenging their claims. "This is not about accountability, it's about coddling students and undermining academic rigor. We need to prioritize excellence over comfort." The atmosphere grew tense, and Marcus felt a surge of determination. "With all due respect, Dr. Monroe, we're not asking for comfort, we're asking for fairness. Students deserve to be treated with respect, and that includes receiving constructive feedback that acknowledges their hard work." As the dialogue continued, it became evident that the administration was beginning to reconsider their stance. In the following weeks, the administration announced a review of the policies regarding faculty feedback and student support. Marcus and his coalition felt a mix of relief and anticipation. They had fought hard for this moment, but they knew that real change would take time and continued effort. During a meeting with Dean Henderson, she expressed gratitude for their dedication. "Your voices have made a significant impact on this campus, and we're committed to ensuring that all students feel valued and supported." Marcus felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. "Thank you for listening to us. We're ready to work together to create a better environment for everyone." With renewed energy, Marcus and his coalition prepared for the upcoming semester, eager to implement the changes they had fought for. As the new academic year began, Marcus felt a sense of hope for the future. The coalition had grown stronger, and students were more engaged than ever. Together, they organized events focused on diversity, inclusion, and advocacy, ensuring that the conversations surrounding these issues continued. One evening, as Marcus reflected on the journey, he gathered with his friends in the library. "Can you believe how far we've come?" he asked, a smile spreading across his face. "We've turned our struggles into something powerful." Jessica nodded, her eyes shining. "We've created a community that values every voice. This is just the beginning." Marcus felt a sense of pride in their accomplishments, knowing that their efforts would pave the way for future students. Together, they had faced adversity and emerged stronger, ready to continue advocating for justice and equality. As the academic year progressed, Marcus took on a leadership role in the coalition, mentoring younger students and guiding them in their advocacy efforts. The legacy of their struggle continued to unfold, inspiring others to speak out against injustice. In the spring, Marcus was invited to share his experiences at a regional conference on education equity. He felt nervous but excited about the opportunity to reach a broader audience. During his speech, he reflected on the power of community and the importance of resilience. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said, addressing the crowd. "It takes courage, determination, and a willingness to stand up for what is right. Together, we can create a future where every student feels safe, valued, and empowered." The applause that followed echoed in his heart, reaffirming his commitment to the cause. Marcus knew that their work was far from over, but with the support of his friends and the community, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As graduation approached, Marcus looked back on his time at Crescent Heights with gratitude. The experiences he had gained and the friendships he had forged would last a lifetime. He knew that the fight for justice in education was ongoing, but he felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that he had played a role in creating change. During his final gathering with the coalition, Marcus shared his vision for the future. "Let's continue to support one another and empower new voices," he urged. "We've laid the groundwork for something beautiful, and I believe that together we can achieve even more." With tears in their eyes, the group promised to stay connected and continue their advocacy efforts, no matter where life took them. After graduation, Marcus received an internship offer from a nonprofit organization focused on education equity. It was an opportunity to take his passion for advocacy to the next level, and he accepted with enthusiasm. As he settled into his new role, Marcus realized that the skills he had developed at Crescent Heights were invaluable. He began to connect with students across different backgrounds, advocating for their rights and empowering them to share their stories. Every day he was reminded of the importance of their work, the voices they had fought to uplift, and the community they had built together. Months later, during a meeting with his colleagues, Marcus shared his vision for expanding the organization's reach. "We need to create more platforms for students to advocate for their needs and share their experiences," he proposed. The team responded positively, and together they began developing initiatives that focused on empowering student leaders and addressing systemic barriers in education. Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose as he collaborated with others who shared his passion. He knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but he was ready to embrace it with open arms. As Marcus continued his work in advocacy, he received a call from Dean Henderson. She invited him back to Crescent Heights to speak at the annual Diversity and Inclusion event, where he could share his journey and inspire current students. Feeling honored, Marcus accepted the invitation. On the day of the event, he stood before a room filled with familiar faces, his heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you for having me back," he began, his voice steady. "I'm here to remind you that your voices matter. The work we started together is ongoing, and I encourage you to continue advocating for what is right. You have the power to create change." As he looked out at the audience, he saw a new generation of students ready to take up the mantle. The legacy of their struggle lived on, and Marcus felt hopeful for the future. Years later, as Marcus reflected on his journey, he knew that every challenge he had faced had led him to where he was today. He had become a passionate advocate for education equity, working tirelessly to uplift student voices across the country. In the quiet moments, he thought back to Crescent Heights, the friendships he had forged, and the community that had shaped him. The journey had been filled with ups and downs, but it was one of resilience, hope, and unwavering determination. With a heart full of gratitude, Marcus continued his work, inspired by the power of voices coming together to create change. He understood that advocacy is an ongoing journey, one that requires continuous learning and support. As he prepared for another speaking engagement, Marcus encouraged his audience to stay connected and engaged. If you believe in the power of your voice and want to join the fight for justice, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us amplify our message and create a community where every voice matters. Together, we can continue making a difference and inspiring change. With that, he smiled, knowing that the fight for justice would never truly end. It would evolve, grow, and inspire countless others along the way. By inviting readers and listeners to subscribe, he hoped to build a larger network of advocates who would carry the torch forward, ensuring that no voice went unheard. "I'm proud of you, man," Ryan said. "You've been pushing for this from the start." "Yeah, well, someone's got to keep you on your toes," Jordan teased. They talked for a few more minutes before Jordan hung up, feeling a renewed sense of determination. The work was hard, and the road was long, but he knew they were making progress. And that was what mattered. As the years passed, the Bridges of Justice initiative grew beyond anyone's expectations. What had started as a local effort to repair the relationship between law enforcement and the community had become a model for cities across the nation. Ryan and Jordan continued to collaborate, finding new ways to strengthen the bonds between officers and the people they served. One of the most successful programs to come out of the initiative was the Community Police Partnership Forum, where citizens and officers met regularly to discuss issues, share concerns, and work together on solutions. The forum created a space for honest dialogue, and it helped to humanize both sides in a way that hadn't been done before. Ryan was particularly proud of the program because it had changed the way officers interacted with the communities they patrolled. Instead of being seen as enforcers, they were becoming protectors and partners, building trust that had been eroded for so long. On one warm summer evening, Ryan attended one of the partnership meetings in a neighborhood that had once been rife with tension between residents and police. Now the atmosphere was friendly, with officers and community members sitting together in small groups, sharing stories and listening to one another. Ryan stood at the edge of the room, watching with a sense of satisfaction. This was what real change looked like: people coming together, finding common ground, and building a future that worked for everyone. Jordan arrived late, sliding into the seat next to Ryan. "Looks like things are going well," he said, surveying the room. "Better than I ever expected," Ryan replied, his voice filled with quiet pride. Jordan grinned. "Told you we could change the world," Ryan chuckled. "One step at a time." The following year, Ryan was invited to speak at a national conference on police reform. Law enforcement leaders, policymakers, and activists from all over the country had gathered to share ideas and discuss the future of policing. Ryan's reputation as a reformer had grown, and his insights were in high demand. As he stood on the stage, addressing the audience, Ryan reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He spoke about the challenges they had faced, the resistance they had encountered, and the progress they had made. But more than anything, he spoke about the need for continued vigilance. "Reform is not a destination," Ryan said, his voice carrying across the room. "It's a process. It's something we have to work at every day. Because the moment we stop pushing, the moment we become complacent, that's when things go backward." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We've made incredible strides in the past few years, but there is still work to be done. And that work doesn't just fall on the shoulders of police officers or activists, it falls on all of us. We all have a role to play in making our society safer, fairer, and more just." The room erupted into applause, and Ryan felt a sense of fulfillment. This was the path he was meant to be on. And as long as he could, he would keep fighting for a better future. Years later, Ryan Carter would look back on his career and see it not just as a series of promotions or achievements, but as a journey toward justice. He would see the faces of the young officers he had mentored, like Naomi Green, who would go on to lead the next generation of law enforcement with integrity and compassion. He would remember the partnerships forged between police and the community, and the bridges built over once impassable divides. And he would know that while the work was never truly done, the legacy of what they had built would endure. One day, as Ryan sat on his porch, watching the sun set over the city, he received a call from Jordan, who had just returned from a speaking engagement in New York. "Ryan," Jordan said, his voice warm with pride. "We did it. The National Policing Standards Act just passed." Ryan smiled, a deep sense of accomplishment washing over him. "I always knew we would." They talked for a few minutes, reminiscing about the journey they had shared before Jordan had to go. As Ryan hung up the phone, he leaned back in his chair, feeling a sense of peace. The fight for justice would continue, and there would always be challenges. But he and Jordan had made their mark. They had helped to create a better world one step at a time. And that, he knew, was more than enough. Though the reforms Ryan and Jordan had championed had taken root, life, as always, presented new challenges. The city continued to evolve, and with it came unforeseen hurdles. One of the most pressing issues was the rise in tensions around technological surveillance and how it was being used by law enforcement. Facial recognition technology, predictive policing software, and increased digital monitoring had become tools in the department's arsenal, but they were also raising ethical questions about privacy and potential misuse. Ryan, now well-versed in navigating the complexities of law enforcement reform, found himself at the center of this debate. On one hand, the new technology was helping to reduce crime in high-risk areas. On the other hand, there were serious concerns about how it disproportionately affected communities of color. Some citizens felt like they were being over-policed in their own neighborhoods, and the debate about privacy rights versus public safety had taken center stage. Sitting in a city council meeting one afternoon, Ryan listened carefully as community members voiced their concerns. Many spoke about how they felt uncomfortable knowing that their every move might be tracked or analyzed by technology they didn't fully understand. Civil liberties groups were pushing back hard against the implementation of these tools, and Jordan, ever the advocate for justice, was working on a legal challenge to curb their use. Ryan, caught in the middle, knew the issue wasn't black and white. Technology, when used responsibly, could be a powerful ally in law enforcement. But he also understood that without careful oversight and clear guidelines, it could easily be abused, further eroding the fragile trust they had worked so hard to build. After the meeting, Ryan was approached by Councilwoman Elena Reyes, a strong voice in favor of civil rights and an outspoken opponent of unchecked surveillance. "Deputy Chief Carter," she greeted him warmly. "What did you think of what you heard today?" Ryan paused before responding. "I think people are right to be concerned. We need to find a balance between protecting public safety and respecting individual privacy. But that's easier said than done." Councilwoman Reyes nodded thoughtfully. "I appreciate your honesty. I think we'll need leaders like you to help navigate this. It's not going away." Ryan knew she was right. As he walked out of City Hall that evening, he felt the weight of the new challenge pressing on him. How could they continue to protect the city while ensuring they didn't sacrifice the very rights they were sworn to uphold? A few days later, Ryan met with Jordan at a coffee shop downtown. Jordan had been busy working on a lawsuit challenging the use of facial recognition technology in public spaces, and he wanted Ryan's input. "Look, I get that the department needs tools to do their job," Jordan said as he stirred his coffee. "But this technology is being disproportionately used in certain neighborhoods. People shouldn't feel like they're living under constant surveillance just because they live in a particular part of town." Ryan nodded, sipping his own coffee. "I agree with you. I've seen the data. It's clear that there's an over-reliance on these tools in communities of color. But the tech isn't the problem by itself, it's how we're using it. We need stronger guidelines. Jordan leaned forward, his eyes intense. Then help me. Join this fight. You've got the influence inside the department to make sure these tools are used fairly, or not used at all if they're causing more harm than good. Ryan exhaled, thinking it over. He had always believed in using every tool available to prevent crime, but Jordan was right. If they weren't careful, this technology could undermine everything they had fought to build. "I'll talk to the chief," Ryan said finally. "We need to make sure this is being done the right way. We can't afford to lose the trust we've gained." Jordan nodded, satisfied for now. "We're on the same page then. Let me know how it goes." In the months that followed, Ryan spearheaded a new task force within the department aimed at ensuring the responsible use of technology in policing. The Ethical Policing Technology Initiative (EPTI) was designed to oversee how new tools were implemented, making sure they adhered to strict privacy standards and weren't being used in a discriminatory manner. Ryan worked closely with civil liberties groups, tech experts, and community leaders to develop guidelines that ensured transparency and accountability. Officers were required to undergo specialized training on how to use these tools ethically, and new oversight measures were put in place to monitor their deployment. The program wasn't without its critics. Some officers complained that the new rules made their jobs harder, while certain tech companies pushed back against what they saw as unnecessary restrictions. But Ryan stood firm, knowing that without proper oversight, the technology could do more harm than good. During one particularly tense department meeting, an officer raised his hand, frustration evident in his voice. "With all due respect, Deputy Chief," he began, "why are we handcuffing ourselves? This technology can help us catch criminals faster. Why put so many restrictions on it?" Ryan met the officer's gaze, understanding the concern but remaining resolute. "Because our job isn't just to catch criminals," he said. "Our job is to protect the people, and that means protecting their rights too. If we start sacrificing privacy and civil liberties in the name of efficiency, then we're not doing our jobs. We're just cutting corners." The room was silent for a moment, and Ryan could see the wheels turning in the officer's mind. It was a tough balancing act, but Ryan knew it was necessary. The future of policing wasn't about brute force or unchecked surveillance. It was about thoughtful, ethical approaches that respected the people they served. 2 years later, the Ethical Policing Technology Initiative had become a model for departments across the country. Ryan had been invited to speak at several national conferences, sharing the lessons they had learned about balancing public safety with civil liberties. The success of the initiative had solidified his reputation as a forward-thinking leader in law enforcement reform. Jordan, too, had continued his advocacy work, pushing for nationwide adoption of similar standards. The two men, despite their different approaches, remained close friends and collaborators, each pushing the other to do better. One evening, after a long day, Ryan received a message from Jordan dinner at my place. When Ryan arrived, Jordan was already grilling steaks on the back porch. The smell of sizzling meat filled the air as they sat down to catch up. "You know, I never thought we'd be here," Jordan said as they ate. "When we started all this, I didn't think we'd actually get to a point where the system would listen to us." Ryan smiled. "I think we both underestimated the power of persistence." Jordan laughed. "You're right about that. But we're not done yet, are we?" "No," Ryan said, his tone serious. "We're not. But we're making progress." They clinked their beer bottles together, a silent toast to the years of hard work and the victories they had earned. The road had been long and filled with obstacles, but they had made a difference one step at a time. As the sun set over the city, casting a warm glow over the skyline, Ryan and Jordan sat in comfortable silence, watching the world they had helped shape. The challenges they had faced, the battles they had fought, had all been worth it. They had built something lasting, something that would continue long after they were gone. Ryan couldn't help but think about the young officers coming up through the ranks, the ones who would carry on the work he had started. Officers like Naomi Green, who now led a unit focused on community engagement, were the future of policing. They represented a new generation that believed in fairness, justice, and the importance of doing things the right way. "I think the future's in good hands," Ryan said, more to himself than to Jordan. Jordan looked over at him, his expression thoughtful. Yeah, I think it is. The two men sat back, content in the knowledge that while their work was never truly done, they had laid a foundation that would stand the test of time. And as long as there were people willing to stand up for what was right, there would always be hope for a better, more just world. A few more years passed, and Ryan Carter's career had reached heights he never imagined when he first joined the force. Now, as the chief of police, Ryan was responsible not only for the reforms that had already taken place, but also for leading the department through new social, technological, and ethical challenges. His success as a reformer had made him a widely respected figure, but it had also placed him under intense scrutiny. Every move he made, every decision he authorized, was dissected by the media and the public. The new debate consuming the city was centered around the rise in community-led safety initiatives. Many neighborhoods, particularly those that had experienced tense relations with the police in the past, were advocating for more localized, community-based public safety programs. These initiatives emphasized conflict resolution, mental health intervention, and restorative justice over traditional policing methods. Ryan understood the community's desire to have a more direct role in keeping their neighborhoods safe. After all, much of the progress they had made over the years was due to increased collaboration between the police and the public. But there were concerns within the department about the implications of scaling back traditional policing in favor of untested community models. One afternoon, as Ryan sat reviewing proposals for community-led initiatives, his deputy, Lieutenant Denise Martin, walked into his office. Denise had been one of Ryan's strongest allies during the reform years, helping him navigate the pushback from the old guard while building support among the rank-and-file officers. "Chief, you've seen the latest push from the city council, right?" Denise asked, a hint of concern in her voice. Ryan nodded, gesturing for her to take a seat. "Yeah, I've been going over it. Community Safety Initiative, they're calling it. They want to divert some funding from the police budget to support it." Denise frowned. "I get where they're coming from, but are they really ready for this? We're talking about removing traditional law enforcement presence in some of the most at-risk neighborhoods. Are we setting them up to fail?" Ryan leaned back in his chair, thinking carefully before responding. "I don't think we should look at it as us versus them. The goal is the same: keeping people safe. The way we've done things isn't the only way to do it. But if we're going to make this work, we need to be partners in the process." Denise nodded, her expression softening. "You think we can pull that off?" Ryan smiled slightly. "We've done harder things." A few days later, Ryan met with Councilwoman Elena Reyes, one of the main architects of the Community Safety Initiative. The two had worked together closely on previous reforms, but this new initiative was pushing them into uncharted territory. Still, Ryan was determined to keep the lines of communication open. Chief Carter, Councilwoman Reyes, greeted him warmly as they sat down in her office. "Thank you for taking the time. I know this isn't an easy conversation." Ryan smiled. "That's why we're here to have the hard conversations. We both want the same thing: safer communities." Reyes nodded, her tone more serious now. "Exactly. But we believe that safety doesn't always have to come from a police presence. These community programs have been shown to reduce violence and increase trust between residents. We want to give people the tools to resolve conflicts without always having to rely on law enforcement." Ryan took a deep breath. "I understand that, and I think there's a lot of potential here. But we also need to make sure that when people call for help, they get the response they need. There are situations where trained law enforcement is necessary, when violence escalates or when people's lives are at risk. We can't ignore that reality." Reyes leaned forward, her eyes thoughtful. "That's why we need your help. We're not talking about eliminating police presence, we're talking about complementing it. Working together with the community instead of always being the first line of defense." Ryan nodded. "I'm open to that. Let's figure out how we can build this partnership. But we need clear guidelines on when the police should step in and when the community can handle things on their own. We also need to make sure that officers aren't feeling like they're being sidelined. If we're going to shift some of the responsibility, we need to bring everyone to the table. Reyes smiled. That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. Over the next few months, the Community Safety Initiative took shape. Ryan and his team worked closely with the City Council and community leaders to design a pilot program that would test the new model in several neighborhoods. The initiative focused on training community members in conflict resolution, mental health first aid, and de-escalation tactics, while keeping a close line of communication with the police for situations that required their involvement. Jordan, ever the advocate for grassroots solutions, was thrilled with the progress. "This is exactly what we've been talking about for years," Jordan said one evening over dinner with Ryan. "Empowering the community to take ownership of their own safety. If this works, it could be a game changer." Ryan nodded, though he remained cautious. "I want it to work as much as you do. But we have to be prepared for things to go wrong, too. If the community doesn't feel supported, or if the police feel like they're being cut out of the process, this could backfire." Jordan raised his glass. "That's why we have you keeping everyone on the same page." Ryan chuckled, clinking his glass against Jordan's. "Let's hope it's enough." As the program rolled out, there were successes and setbacks. In some neighborhoods, the community-led safety efforts resulted in a noticeable decrease in calls for police intervention. People began resolving disputes among themselves, and trust between residents and law enforcement improved. But in other areas, old tensions resurfaced. Some officers felt their authority was being undermined, while certain residents still feared police involvement, leading to hesitations in calling for help when it was really needed. Ryan worked tirelessly to address these issues, meeting with officers and community leaders, adjusting the program as needed. He knew this was part of the growing pains of any new initiative, but he also knew they couldn't afford to let the early successes slip away. The true test of the Community Safety Initiative came one night when a major confrontation erupted between two rival groups in one of the pilot neighborhoods. The conflict had escalated quickly, with rumors of violence spreading through social media. Normally, the police would have responded immediately, but this time, the community leaders who had been trained through the initiative decided to step in first. Ryan and his team were on standby, monitoring the situation closely. He had already instructed the officers to be ready to intervene if things got out of hand. But he was hoping that the community could de-escalate the situation without the need for force. For hours, tensions ran high as the trained mediators worked to calm both sides. The situation was touch and go, but just as things seemed like they were about to erupt into violence, a breakthrough happened. The leaders of both groups agreed to meet, with the mediators acting as go-betweens, and after a tense negotiation, they reached a resolution without a single arrest or injury. When Ryan received the call that the situation had been resolved peacefully, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. "We did it," Denise said, her voice filled with awe as she stood beside Ryan in the precinct's command center. Ryan nodded, his expression serious. "The community did it. We were there to back them up, but they handled it on their own." Jordan called Ryan that night, excited about the news. "This is huge, man, proof that this model works. People are going to take notice." Ryan smiled but remained grounded. "It's a big step, but we have to stay focused. This isn't a one-time thing. We need to keep refining the process, making sure that both the community and the police are working together." Months later, the success of the pilot program had attracted national attention. Cities across the country were interested in replicating the model, and Ryan was once again at the forefront of a new wave of reform. This time, the focus wasn't just on how police could change, but on how entire communities could take ownership of their safety while still collaborating with law enforcement. Jordan, as always, remained by Ryan's side, helping to push the legal framework for these initiatives across the country. The two friends had come a long way from that fateful night they had been pulled over. Their partnership had transformed the city and was now shaping the future of public safety nationwide. As Ryan sat in his office preparing for yet another interview with a national news outlet about the program's success, he couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. The road hadn't been easy, and there were still challenges ahead. But they had built something lasting, something that would change lives for generations to come. Looking out the window at the city he had dedicated his life to, Ryan smiled. The work was never done, but for the first time, he felt truly optimistic about the future. They had started with a fight for justice, but now they were building a future of hope, partnership, and community-led safety. And as long as people were willing to work together, Ryan knew that anything was possible. A few years had passed since the Community Safety Initiative had been fully implemented across the city. The initiative had matured, becoming an example of how community and law enforcement could work together in harmony without one undermining the other. While there were still challenges, the overwhelming success had drawn attention from policymakers, activists, and law enforcement agencies across the country. Ryan Carter, now nearing retirement age, was in a reflective mood. After decades of service, he knew his time as the city's police chief was coming to an end. And while he looked forward to stepping back from the pressures of the job, he also felt the weight of leaving behind a legacy. Jordan, meanwhile, had taken his advocacy work to a national level. He was now leading efforts to pass federal legislation aimed at reshaping policing standards across the United States. They were both busy men, but their friendship remained as strong as ever. One evening, as Ryan sat at his kitchen table going over the plans for his final year in office, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Jordan Need to talk. "Big news. Let's meet tomorrow." Ryan smiled to himself. Jordan always had big news. Over the years, they had shared so many victories, setbacks, and countless moments of celebration and frustration. But it was their shared vision that had kept them moving forward. The next day, Ryan met Jordan at a small diner they used to frequent in their early days as young professionals. It felt nostalgic, sitting in the same booth where they had once dreamed of making a difference. Now, years later, they had done more than dream, they had transformed their city. "All right, Jordan, what's this big news?" Ryan asked as he settled into the booth. Jordan leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. "I've been talking with some of the top people in Washington. They want to take what we've done here with the Community Safety Initiative and turn it into a national pilot program. It'll be the first time this kind of community-driven public safety model has been tested on such a large scale." Ryan sat back, absorbing the news. "National pilot program? That's huge. What's the plan?" Jordan nodded enthusiastically. "They're looking for cities willing to try it. We'd take the model we built and expand it, tweaking it based on the unique needs of different communities. They want to bring me on as a national advisor, but more importantly, they want your input." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "My input? I'm about to retire, Jordan. I'm not sure I'm the guy for this." Jordan shook his head, a grin spreading across his face. "You're exactly the guy for this. You've seen this work on the ground. You've lived it. And the fact that you've been in law enforcement gives you the credibility to convince other departments that this isn't just some idealistic dream, it's real, and it works." Ryan rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "It's a big ask. I've spent my entire career in this city. I'm not sure I'm ready for something on that scale." Jordan leaned in, his voice quieter now. "I know you're ready to step back, but think about it. This could be the final piece of the puzzle scaling this idea across the country. You could retire knowing that what we built here is making an impact everywhere. Just give it some thought." Ryan didn't respond immediately, but he knew Jordan had a point. The work they had started in their city had the potential to be something even greater. But after years of leading a department, Ryan wasn't sure if he had the energy for another national fight. "You'll think about it," Ryan said finally, his tone cautious. Jordan smiled. "That's all I'm asking." As Ryan approached the end of his tenure as police chief, he began preparing his department for the transition. He had mentored several officers who were strong candidates to succeed him, including Lieutenant Denise Martin, who had proven herself to be a capable leader and a dedicated advocate for the community-first approach they had built. One afternoon, Ryan called Denise into his office. "Denise, you've been one of the strongest leaders in this department for years," Ryan said, looking across his desk at her. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, and I believe you're ready to take the reins." Denise's eyes widened slightly, though she had suspected this moment was coming. Chief, that means a lot. I've learned so much from you, and I believe in what we've built together. But I know there's still so much more to do. Ryan nodded, his face thoughtful. That's exactly why I know you're the right person for this. You've always been driven by the same things that pushed me: justice, fairness, and a commitment to serving the people. This department needs someone like you to keep it moving forward. Denise sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Ryan's words settling on her shoulders. Thank you, Chief. I won't let you down. I know you won't, Ryan said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. And remember, you're not doing this alone. Lean on your team, and don't be afraid to keep pushing for change, even when it's hard. As Denise left the office, Ryan felt a sense of peace. The future of the department was in good hands. It was time for him to step back and let the next generation lead. With his retirement officially announced, Ryan took a few weeks to reflect on Jordan's proposal. The idea of taking the community safety initiative to a national level intrigued him, but he was also ready for a quieter life after years of public service. He spent more time with his family, enjoying the slower pace, but the thought of leaving the work behind nagged at him. One evening, Ryan found himself sitting on his back porch, the sun setting over the city skyline. The phone buzzed, and he saw a message from Jordan. Still waiting on you, old man. Time's ticking. Ryan chuckled to himself, shaking his head. Jordan never gave up on a fight. That night, Ryan made his decision. He wasn't ready to walk away from it all just yet. The work they had started was too important, and if there was a chance to make a lasting impact on a national scale, he wanted to be a part of it. The next morning, Ryan called Jordan. All right, I'm in. Let's do this. Jordan's voice was filled with triumph. I knew you couldn't resist. This is going to be big, Ryan. We're about to change the game. With the decision made, Ryan found himself in Washington, D.C., meeting with lawmakers, community leaders, and law enforcement officials from across the country. The national pilot program was being rolled out in 10 major cities, and Ryan was instrumental in helping to shape its implementation. His experience in building the initiative from the ground up gave him a unique perspective, and his input was invaluable as they adapted the program to fit the specific needs of different communities. Jordan, as always, was right there with him, leading the charge from the legal side and ensuring that the program stayed true to its original goals of fairness, justice, and community empowerment. As the months passed, Ryan found himself energized by the work. He had thought he was ready for retirement, but this new mission gave him a renewed sense of purpose. 2 years into the national pilot program, the results were undeniable. The Community Safety Initiative had reduced violent incidents, built stronger bonds between law enforcement and residents, and empowered communities to take control of their own safety. The program was hailed as a success, and plans were already underway to expand it to even more cities. Ryan, now in his mid-60s, knew it was finally time to step back for good. His work was done. He had helped lay the foundation for a new era of policing and community collaboration, and he had no doubt that the leaders who followed would continue to build on that legacy. As he stood on the steps of the Capitol, watching the latest round of national reforms being signed into law, Ryan felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had spent his life fighting for justice, for fairness, and for a better future. And now that future was being realized. Jordan stood beside him, grinning. Well, old man, we did it. Ryan smiled, his eyes reflecting both pride and relief. Yeah, we did. They stood there together, watching the crowds below, knowing that their fight had been worth it. The road had been long, the challenges immense, but they had built something lasting, something that would shape the future for generations to come. And in that moment, Ryan knew that while his journey as a public servant was over, his legacy of justice, reform, and hope would live on. Ryan Carter had officially retired from his role as chief of police and had successfully completed his work on the national pilot program. Now, standing on the balcony of his home in Denver, he gazed out over the city that had shaped his life. After decades of service, he was finally stepping away from the day-to-day grind of law enforcement. But it didn't feel like the end. In many ways, it felt like a new beginning. Without the constant pressures of his old position, Ryan found himself reconnecting with old hobbies and passions that he hadn't had time for in years. He spent more time with his family, his wife Elena, and their two grown children, Tyler and Sophia. The past few years had been especially hard on them with Ryan's intense focus on work, and now he wanted to make up for lost time. One sunny afternoon, Ryan and Elena took a walk through the park, something they hadn't done in what felt like ages. The air was crisp, the leaves falling gently around them, and Ryan felt a sense of peace that he hadn't experienced in years. "You finally have time to slow down," Elena said with a smile as they strolled along the path. Ryan nodded. "It feels strange, but it's nice. I think I forgot what it was like to just be present." Elena squeezed his hand. "You've earned it, but I have a feeling you're not done yet." Ryan smiled, knowing she was right. Even in retirement, his mind still buzzed with thoughts about how he could continue making a difference. But this time, he would do it on his terms, without the constant demands of his old job weighing him down. A few months into his retirement, Ryan was approached by a local university to teach a course on ethical leadership and policing reform. The idea intrigued him. He had spent years putting these principles into practice, but now he had the opportunity to pass that knowledge on to the next generation of leaders. The thought of stepping into a classroom full of eager students, young people, who would one day be responsible for shaping the future of law enforcement, gave Ryan a renewed sense of purpose. He accepted the offer and began preparing for the course. On his first day at the university, Ryan felt a twinge of nervousness as he walked into the lecture hall. The students sat quietly, some of them looking excited, others curious, all waiting for the former police chief who had gained national recognition for his reforms. "Good afternoon," Ryan began, standing at the front of the class. "My name is Ryan Carter, and am here to talk to you about the future of policing." He paused, scanning the room before continuing. "But before we talk about the future, we need to understand the past, the mistakes, the challenges, and the moments when we didn't get it right. Because if we don't learn from those moments, we'll be doomed to repeat them." The room was silent as Ryan spoke, but he could feel the students' attention. Their interest piqued. Over the course of the semester, Ryan shared not just the victories he'd had in his career, but the hard lessons he had learned along the way. He emphasized the importance of empathy, listening, and above all, the responsibility that comes with the badge. Teaching gave Ryan a new outlet for his energy and passion. It wasn't the adrenaline-filled, high-stakes work of policing, but it was just as important. These students were the future, and he was determined to equip them with the tools they needed to lead with integrity. While Ryan was settling into his new role as an educator, Jordan Thompson's star continued to rise. His work on the national level had gained him a reputation as one of the most respected voices in the fight for justice reform. Jordan had helped pass landmark legislation that put ethical limits on the use of surveillance technology, created national standards for police accountability, and expanded community-led safety programs across the country. One afternoon, Jordan called Ryan from his office in Washington, D.C., and with some unexpected news. "Ryan, guess what?" Jordan said, his voice buzzing with excitement. "They want me to run for office." Ryan chuckled. "Who's they? And what office are we talking about here?" Jordan laughed. "A group of people who've been following my work think I should run for Congress. They want me to take this fight from the courtroom to the Capitol." Ryan wasn't entirely surprised. Jordan had always been a fighter, and he had the kind of charisma and conviction that made him a natural leader. "I can't say I didn't see this coming. Are you thinking about it?" "I am," Jordan admitted. "It's a huge responsibility, but I've been thinking about how much more we could accomplish with the right people in power. If I can push for change at the highest level, why not go for it?" Ryan nodded, though Jordan couldn't see it. "You've always said we need people inside the system to change it from within. This might be your chance to do just that." "I've been thinking the same thing," Jordan replied. "It's a big step, but I think it's the right one." As they talked, Ryan felt a deep sense of pride for his friend. Jordan had spent his life fighting for justice, and now he was on the verge of taking that fight to the national stage. The following year, Jordan launched his campaign for Congress. With his years of legal experience and his proven track record in reform, he quickly gained support from a wide range of voters. His platform focused on criminal justice reform, civil rights, and economic equality issues that had been central to his work for decades. Ryan, though retired, was actively involved in the campaign, offering advice and helping Jordan connect with key community leaders. He traveled with Jordan to campaign events, standing by his side as they continued to push for the changes they had always believed in. On the night of the election, Ryan sat in the campaign's headquarters, surrounded by Jordan's team, watching the results roll in. The energy in the room was electric, but Ryan remained calm, reflecting on everything they had accomplished together. When the final votes were tallied, it was official: Jordan had won the election. The room erupted into cheers, and Jordan was immediately swarmed by supporters and media. But as soon as he had a moment, Jordan made his way through the crowd to Ryan. "We did it, man," Jordan said, grinning from ear to ear. Ryan smiled, shaking his friend's hand before pulling him into a hug. "You did it! I'm proud of you." Jordan nodded, his expression turning serious for a moment. "None of this would have happened without you, Ryan. We've been in this together from the start." As the celebration continued, Ryan couldn't help but feel that this was only the beginning of something even bigger. Jordan's election to Congress meant that the work they had started years ago, the fight for justice, fairness, and accountability, was now being carried forward on a national level. And while Ryan was stepping back, he knew that the movement would continue to grow, led by people like Jordan, who were ready to take the next steps. As Ryan watched Jordan deliver his victory speech later that night, he felt a sense of closure and fulfillment. The work they had done together had made a lasting impact, not just in their city, but across the country. They had faced countless obstacles, but through it all, they had never given up. Ryan's life was quieter now, but it was filled with meaning. His time teaching at the university continued to bring him joy, and the students he mentored were already starting to make waves in the fields of law enforcement, social justice, and community activism. His influence would live on through them, and through the work Jordan was doing on a national scale. In the end, Ryan realized that the fight for justice never truly ended. It was passed down from one generation to the next, evolving with each new challenge. But he took comfort in knowing that the work would continue long after he was gone. And as he looked toward the future, Ryan Carter was filled with hope that the lessons they had learned, the battles they had fought, and the progress they had made would lead to a world that was fairer, more just, and filled with opportunity for all. As the story draws to a close, we want to thank you for joining us on this powerful journey of justice, friendship, and change. If you enjoyed this story and want more thought-provoking content like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue sharing stories that inspire, challenge, and make a difference. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear where you're watching from and what impact this story had on you. Subscribe now for more impactful stories and content that makes you think. We value your feedback, so if you enjoyed this story, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community, and stay tuned for more stories that remind us all that no matter how hard things get, we are never truly alone.